So, guys, let's dive into the defensive keys and like in a lot of ways, I'm at the point now, fellas, where I just kind of and I don't. It's been it's I don't even know if you guys have ever experienced this because you're both a lot younger than I am. But this is the first time really since like Lou Holtz was coaching and I was a teenager that I just assume going into every game that the defense is just going to dominate their opponent, and I don't even think about it. I mean, yeah, like that maybe 2012, but even then it was like you could tell they weren't playing very good offenses. I was very nervous going into the Oklahoma game. I'm not even going to lie to you. Where like now I'm just like, all right, I expect them to hold this team under 14 points in some capacity. Can the offense score more than 14? So in a lot of ways, guys, it's kind of just keep doing what you're doing, right? With maybe Trevor one little exception.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'm in the same boat as you. What more can you ask from this defense? You know what I mean? They've held their last three opponents to an average of 9.3 points per game. My biggest takeaway with them is it almost mirrors the offense. Is start fast. You go back and you look at some of the games that Notre Dame has played over recent weeks. I mean, last week they gave up a 16-play, 75-yard drive to Florida State to open it up. On Navy's first drive of the game where they didn't turn the ball over, it was 5 plays, 80 yards. You know, that was ignited by that big run by Blake Horvath. Against Georgia Tech on their second drive, they went for a 13-play, 71-yard touchdown drive. So all in all, we're talking about performances where they held good offenses to very minimal, outside Florida State's, very minimal points. But again, Virginia to me is a gritty enough team that if you give them just a glimmer of hope of, hey, we can kind of hang around with the best defense in the country, that's enough to give them enough momentum to potentially hang around a little bit longer than what they should. So I think start fast is also a good key to victory for this Notre Dame defense as well.
Because you look at the schedule, guys. Florida State scored on their first possession. Navy was actually driving before their turnover on their first possession. Georgia Tech scored on their second possession and led 7-0 at the end of the first quarter. Stanford scored on their first possession. Louisville scored on their first possession. And Notre Dame had to force a turnover. Well, actually, they forced a punt from Miami, and then an interception led to them kind of having a chance to score. Fortunately, the defense was able to hold there. And you let Texas A&M go down and score on their first drive, and you let Northern Illinois score on their first drive, 98-yard drive. There's been a lot of games this year. If you want to find a flaw of the defense, and we have to kind of look hard to find one, it's they kind of bear a little slow out of the gate. And then once they figure it out, you may not get a first down or move past midfield. You know what I mean? But like that slow start, if the offense does come out blazing, then you need to do your part to do that. And Ryan, to me, there's one giant key to completely shutting down this Virginia offense, and that is you got to get after Calandria. He's a 6-foot quarterback that's a pretty good athlete, that when he gets into a rhythm, he's a good football player. But if you get him out of rhythm, you can have a lot of success against this offense.
As the kids would say, Anthony Calandria is a very fun college quarterback because he's chaos in a bottle, dude. Like his best stuff is really good. Like it really is. Like he can move well in and outside of the pocket a little bit. He's got a pretty strong arm despite only being 6 foot, but like
$185. Yeah, he can spin it.
He holds the ball way too long a lot of the times, which I like. I know this offensive line has given up 30 sacks this year, which like I don't think it's a great offensive line by any stretch, but like there are a lot of those sacks where I'm just kind of like, I just think he held the ball like way too long. Like there's just been a lot of that this year because he's got a little bit of that hero ball to him, right? Like he wants to hold the ball, he wants to create big plays. It's a double-edged sword though. I mean, it's like we've seen a lot of guys in the history of the NFL, right? Like Josh Allen, Brett Favre, like those types of dudes where it's like their greatest weapon is also their biggest weakness, right?
John Elway was that
fall
way.
into it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
They fall into, I can make a lot of big plays, and sometimes I get careless with the football, which is the reason that he has had 8 interceptions, 4 fumbles, and he's been sacked 30 times, right? Like he is a very volatile quarterback. But if he gets into a rhythm where he's feeling himself and he thinks that he can be Superman, that's when he is super, super dangerous. So yeah,
you saw that against Louisville, Ryan, when his legs were a big reason they started coming back in that football game, right? I mean, but here's why this is so important too, Ryan. And I'll add, everything you said is correct, but I'll add to this. They need him to do that. They're not good enough on offense to succeed without him being that way. He has to play that way. And that's why rattling him early is huge. a big part of this game because they're not good. They're not good enough to just come out and like they may have a drive or two like Florida State did where they get a couple runs and maybe they push Notre Dame off the ball a little bit, but they're not going to be able to come out here and just run the ball all over Notre Dame. This Notre Dame run defense is not as good as I would like it to be, but it's way better than what it was last year. You know what I mean? Where they would give up. I mean, they had what, 1, 2, 3, 3 games of over 175 yards and see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games of over 120 yards that they gave up rushing. This year, they've had 3 of those, right? You had the Northern Illinois game, and then but Navy, you count Navy as one, but let's be honest, holding Navy 222 yards is a huge victory. And then your next 2 highest outcome, you had 146 against Texas A&M, which only 3.8 per carry. You held Louisville to 131, 3.7 per carry. You shut down Stanford's run game. You shut down Georgia Tech's run game, which, by the way, for Notre Dame fans who have not watched Georgia Tech play this year outside of the Notre Dame game, that was a brilliant defensive performance because that is a really good rushing team. Just go ask Miami what kind of rushing team that is. Ask North Carolina the week before they played Notre Dame what kind of rushing team that is. They can't do that, right? And as much as we love Malachi Fields, and we're going to talk about him later, I know Trev's going to talk about him, it's not enough for them to just go up and down the field playing base offense. They need this kid to be sort of their Superman, their Riley Leonard, essentially, because they're not good enough without it. So if you take that away and you get him working backwards or him rushing his throws, or the other thing too is you get quick pressures and you get your hands up and you get 6'5" Riley Mills gets his hands up and 6'5" Gabriel Rubio gets his hands up and Josh Burnham, who's 6'4" with super long arms, and RJ Oben 6'4" with super long arms. That kid's 6 feet tall, maybe. I was actually going to ask you, Ryan, about
he's not 6 foot.
That's what I was going to ask you because I know you got some official measure. Hey, he's 6 foot maybe with cleats on, right? So those are the things: is disrupt him, get that pressure, get into the backfield, get him out of rhythm. If he gets out, if you don't let him get going early, this game could get over real fast, fellas, real fast. And Trev, part of that to me, their tackles are not good. They're not good. You have to dominate the edge of the line. Now, I don't know which tackle is going to start, but they both stink. They've both given up multiple, like they're over 10 pressures. Both of the guys that have played left tackle this year have given up 4 sacks each, according to Pro Football Focus. They remind me a lot of the Louisville tackles, but not as good. Meaning like they're stiff, they're tall, they dominate the edge. You shut down their run game and funnel everything inside. You dominate the edge. You get after Calandria. You dominate on the edge. You also make sure he doesn't get out of the pocket. I think Josh Burnham and RJ Oben and Bryce Young and Junior Telemaka are going to be huge keys to absolutely shutting down. We talk a lot about the tackles. Obviously you won't have Howard Cross this week, and Riley Mills has been on fire and Donovan High. But to me, this is a game where I'm going to be keying on those 4 guys on the edge to see what they do to really shut down this Virginia offense.
Yeah, I agree. This game almost kind of screams like a Bryce Young welcome to college football moment type of game. I really believe so because athletically, especially once you factor in his size, I think he's the most athletic defensive end that Notre Dame has that's healthy right now. I do. So, you talk about the height difference.
That could be true if he's healthy.
Fair enough. I was going to say like Bubakar could probably compete with them, but still, you go and you talk about the height difference with Calandria. This feels like a game where Bryce Young's going to get a handful of pressures, maybe rip off 1 or 2 sacks, get a couple of tip passes in there. One of them might be picked off. So, I think the edge rushers really need to dominate in this game because, like I talked about last week, Notre Dame hasn't really faced more of a traditional offense, and Riley Mills just played like, a man possessed last week. And honestly, didn't really give anybody else a chance to get after the quarterback a little bit, which I will not be upset if that happens again this week. I won't. But at some point, the edge rushers for Notre Dame are going to have to come alive. And we've seen spurts, right? We've seen little moments from Josh Burnham and little moments from Junior Tuialamaka and little moments from Bryce Young. Some on and off here from RJ Oben. Got to finish the play, but we've seen him get after people in the backfield. This has to be a game where Notre Dame exposes the right and left tackles for Virginia because they're going to need that moving forward. They really are. I'm with you.
Ryan, here's another thing too. Calandria is a key. And here's the other thing: as I watch film, I watched the Carolina game, I watched the Louisville game. Here's the one thing that concerns me. Xavier Brown is the one guy that concerns me offensively. He's the one potential big play guy they have that's been banged up. But especially, here's where it's unique to Notre Dame. They have shown a willingness to get him out of the backfield with some wheels and some swings and some things like that. They hit a touchdown pass again. I think it was a touchdown pass against North Carolina, a little shorter one, a little quick wheel. He obviously had the long touchdown catch and run against Louisville that really sparked their offense in that game. And he's the one guy that you look at and say, okay, that guy has some juice in that offense. And he looks like he's getting healthier after missing last year. And Notre Dame has been vulnerable to backs out of the backfield this season at times, especially with motions, but also with just free releases. Because what you can't do is you can't allow this team to kind of rip off some momentum-changing big plays. And there's really only three guys in their offense that have the athletic ability or talent to do that. It's Calandria, Malachi Fields, and Xavier Brown. And so they are going to they're going to design some stuff, Ryan, to try to get him the ball against Notre Dame's linebackers in hopes that, hey, if we catch them on a blitz, his sucker could go for a big play, especially after watching Florida State out-leverage Notre Dame's defense as often as they did last week with those little quick pitches to their running backs.
Man, the Chris Tyree disrespect. I thought you Virginia guys had to stick together, man. It's crazy.
Well, they don't give him the ball.
They don't give him the ball. He's been bagged up too, apparently. But yeah. I think that for me, like, this is an offense that it's going to live and die by the big play at times as well. Because I agree. I don't think they have a lot of big play players, which is why one game their offense looks pretty good, and then the next game it doesn't look overly good. That's why it's a volatile thing. It's not just Anthony Calandria. It's the fact that I don't think they have a ton of speed. Like even Malachi Fields, number 8, listed at 6'4", really good outside boundary receiver. I mean, he's got 40-something catches, over 600 yards this year. He's having a really good year for Virginia. He's not a speed guy. Like I'm going to out leverage you with my length and my catch radius. Like that's how he's going to win down the field. So if you're Leonard Moore, you're going to get him a lot in the boundary this week. Like that's going to be the matchup where, and I think that I think Leonard Moore has been really, really good for Notre Dame. But like at the end of the day, if I'm Tony Elliott and this offensive staff, I'm going to look around on the depth chart and say like, hey, they still do have a freshman playing into the boundary, right? Like that's a pretty tough task against our best player. So I think that they're going to take an opportunity to try to test him. And I think we'll know very early on. I think it's going to be the first couple of series. We're going to know very early on if Notre Dame's defense is going to have one of those type performances that they seemingly do every single week. Because if this is a team that can't create a big play on the first or second drive of this game, I think that they might go into a shell a little bit and be like, oh, I don't know if this is going to work until probably in the second half where they're in a little bit of garbage time where that stuff typically happens. But yeah, eliminate big plays because this is not an efficient running team at all. They are not an efficient short area passing game either. So if you force this team to be uncomfortable and not be able to create big plays, they're not going to be a sustainable offense.
And Trev, that's kind of why when I look at this game plan, why I focus, and you and I've talked about this off the air multiple times, and we talked a little bit on Tuesday of the Xavier Brown aspect of it. Because to me, to Ryan's point, Malachi Fields might hit you for a couple back shoulders for 30 yards. He's not going to hit a bunch of 60, 70-yard game changers unless somebody falls down or you miss a tackle or something like that. And when you look at Virginia, I'm looking at the breakdown you did the other day, Trev, and they rank 81st in scoring, 60th in total offense, 86th in rushing offense, 72nd in yards per completion, 52nd in yards per attempt, 109th in third down, 98th in red zone, 54th in turnovers. But there's one stat that you look at and say, okay, that doesn't look like the other stats. And it's the one you and I discussed the other day. Virginia ranks 36th in college football in plays of 40 yards or more, which does not at all track with a team that is 80th in scoring and a team that's 60th in yards per game and 72nd in yards per play, which means there's a lot of nothing and then boom, big play. A lot of nothing and then boom, big play. And if you shut that down, they are going to have a tough time scoring. Forget the upset, just scoring, period. And it just adds to the importance of that. And I think the biggest weapon that they're going to have is their backside of the backfield. And you have to have a game plan for that, in my opinion. Have to have a game plan for that. And we'll see if Notre Dame does.
Yeah, I agree. They're going to do everything that they can to get the ball into the hands of Xavier Brown because he's not even listed as a starting running back. I think it's still Kobe Pace.
He is,
But
yeah.
but Kobe Pace is more of just your between the tackles, downhill runner. Like he's not fast. He doesn't have that much big playability. He kind of reminds me of one of those guys where, you need 4 yards, he'll get you 5. You need 10 yards, he'll
Yeah.
get you 5. He's one of those guys. But Xavier Brown definitely adds that change of pace. He can catch well out of the backfield. But for Notre Dame, I think on defense, it comes down to eye discipline and staying disciplined because Virginia is not an offense that can methodically move the ball down the field. If you can eliminate plays of, that 25-yard chunk, a 30-yard chunk, an 11-yard chunk, like if you can get rid of those, then I think Notre Dame's defense is going to be fine. Last little nugget that I'll add, against Pitt early on, they tried a lot of like random misdirection things. I mean, they had almost like a Philly special-esque type of, wide receiver pass to Calandria, who was wide open up the sideline. And then they did a similar play, but it was a reverse, like I think later on the same drive or on the following drive in the second quarter. So just one thing, it's when an inferior team like this comes into South Bend, they're looking to pull off the upset. They're going to throw a couple of those at you. It's just all goes into being disappointed.
They're going to empty the clip, baby. They got nothing left
right.
at this point. So
just like Florida State did. Hopefully, for Virginia's sake, they can do a little bit more than just that first series. But kind of going through some of this, Trev, you mentioned that Kobe Pace is still their leading rusher, but it's by a small handful of yards, and he's got way more carries. It's by 6 yards, but he's got 32 more carries, right? But it's like just looking through their box score, guys, it's like comical because they don't score short touchdowns. Part of the reason they're not good in the red zone is because they can't get into the red zone. But I'm looking at like the Clemson game, 44-yard touchdown, 65-yard touchdown, 46-yard touchdown against Louisville, 68-yard touchdown against North Carolina. They had 2 field goals and then a 68-yard touchdown. That's been kind of their MO a lot this year. Xavier Brown had a 24-yard touchdown catch against Pitt last weekend, which gave UVA the lead. His 46-yard touchdown pass against Louisville gave them a 20-17 fourth quarter lead. Malachi Fields with a 44-yard touchdown, to help spark them in another game that gave them a lead. So that's the thing, is that's what they've had to feast on because they're just not good enough to consistently move the football. I look at the Coastal Carolina game. Kobe Pace, 15 carries for 57 yards. Xavier Brown, 9 carries, 171 yards, right? I mean, it's that type of thing where they're just going to try to chunk you to death. Notre Dame's been pretty good at not – like I actually felt early in the year Notre Dame was not good at that. Like early in the year, remember, Trev, when we were doing a breakdown, one of the statistical breakdowns, and we were like Notre Dame's like 5th, 8th, 12th, 9th, 6th, 2nd. And all of a sudden you get down to like most plays of 20 yards allowed or more, and they were like 69th or something like that, right? Well, lo and behold, now when you look at their defense, if you look at gains of 30 yards or more, they're 8th. If you look at gains of 20 yards or more, they're 10th. I think like game 3 or 4, I think it was going into the Louisville game actually, when they were like in the 50s or 60s in that, because they just have stopped giving that up. You keep that going against Virginia, guys, they have 0 chance in this game, barring your own offense giving them 3 scoring possessions. That's really the only chance that they have. And it reminds me a lot of the Miami game, Ryan. You and I talked a very similar thing early on against Miami. You remember that? We talked about the slot receiver, and we talked about this against Northern Illinois too. We said with Ontario Brown and that slot receiver that Northern Illinois has, you said you can't let Rudolph, or is it Randolph?
Travion Rudolph, I think, or Rudolph. Rudolph.
So you can't let those guys get big plays. What's the only touchdown drive Northern Illinois had that entire game? It was an 80-something yard touchdown pass, right? I watched Northern Illinois last night against who'd they beat last night? Akron. And that's exactly where a lot of their big scores came from. It's just long plays, jet sweep here, run there. If you shut that down from this team, they do nothing on you. So it's going to be a key. Last piece, guys, is create pass game inefficiency for them. Don't let them get into an early rhythm throwing the football. They are a pretty good passing team. Just look at the number. Pretty decent passing team, I should say. Not good, but decent passing team. They rank 39th in college football in passing yards per game. They've had some really good performances, 357 against Wake Forest, 297 against Richmond, 301 against Louisville, 278 against Clemson, 281 against North Carolina. But here's the thing I noticed when I was looking through their statistics. Calandria, well, I should say the pass offense, I should say, I'm going to pull up Calandria specifically. He this season has had 5 games where he has completed 50% of his, less than 60% of his throws in 5 games. Their record in those 5 games where he's been sub 60% is 1-4. They're just not good enough to overcome 2nd and long, 3rd and long. Trevor, you had it in your breakdown. They rank 109th in 3rd down offense. It fits right in what we talked about. Their big plays are bust. And you got to make sure that they're inefficient in the pass game. Because if they get in the 3rd and long, guys, Notre Dame's not giving up very many big pass plays. That's just been their bread and butter all year. It's the 1st and 2nd down stuff. So if you can create some inefficiency in the pass game, this offense is going to struggle to do enough to win.
I mean, I think it always comes back to the Calandria kid again, right? Like, I think that he is still a young kid, only a true sophomore, where if we're a little bit if you run a little bit of some multiple coverages at times or roll to stuff post snap, like I think that stuff can really mess with him. And I think he's going to turn the football over, but I just think that he's a feast or famine kid right now. That's what he is, right? Like, he's not built off of rhythm in the sense of getting the ball out on time. He's built off of rhythm in terms of him thinking he can make big plays all the time. Like, that's the rhythm that he brings to the table. So if you confuse him, he's going to be erratic, and that from a not only general accuracy perspective, but he's going to make some erratic decisions as well. So that's going to come down to it. I mentioned it already: 8 interceptions, 4 fumbles, 30 sacks he's taken this year. This kid doesn't really understand how to get the ball out on time consistently. He's going to take some unreasonable chances, and I don't think he sees the field overly well right now because he's a young cat.
Trev, it kind of fits in also to what you talked about earlier, right? You talk about the big, tall, long guys. Part of creating an inefficient pass game is if the quarterback does start to feel panic and tries to get the ball out quick, you got all these trees knocking the ball down. You know, that it all ties together, Trevor. And if this team struggles to get their pass game going on 1st and 2nd down, it's going to be a long day. Very long day.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that Calandria has faced a defense that has this quite of like speed at all levels.
In fairness, most teams have, most quarterbacks haven't.
Sure. No, absolutely. 100% they have not.
I saw some graph some guy put out from one of the models guys, and it was like a graph. Ryan, you've seen them, right? Trev, you've seen them where it's like the cross graph, and they like how you fit to here, and like it was based on, and there was like Notre Dame all the way out here, like with no one near them, and it was some graph for pass defense, and you're like, no one's even close.
No,
to what Notre Dame hasn't been in pass defense this season. They've held 3 of their last 4 opponents to under 100 yards of passing, which is wild.
No, wild. It's insane. I mean, I think you're going to see a lot of batted passes at the line of scrimmage. I really do. The length is just going to be something that's going to really, really hurt Virginia's offense as a whole. The speed is going to be something like they haven't seen this year. So, I mean, as long as the defense comes in and plays a fundamentally sound game, I think we're going to be talking very much of the same that we've seen over the last couple of weeks from them. I really do.
And it's a very long Notre Dame defense. So that's going to do it for that, guys. I want to get to the prediction. So, folks, hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, and we would love it if you gave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you are listening to our show.